In the ongoing quest for enlightenment or cognitive advancement, most of us start out with preformed ideas on what we think enlightenment is or what we think it should be. We all create certain expectations about what we think enlightenment is supposed to do for us, and in almost all cases, what we think we are pursuing is based on ages-old stories of mystical encounters with some kind of divine something or other. With everyone approaching this pursuit of enlightenment from a first cognition starting point, we really don't know what we're doing in this process, but we have read enough stories of wise monks, gurus, or other people who have allegedly had some mystical encounter with the divine, whatever that is. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Beall, and welcome to Attaining the Second Cognition. I'm going to offer more insight into the road to the second cognition, and the title of this presentation is Retrospective Enlightenment. To start this out, let's take a look at a few of the definitions of enlightenment from Merriam-Webster's dictionary. The first definition is the act or means of enlightening. Well, that doesn't tell us much of anything now, does it? Let's see what else Webster's has to offer. The second definition is the state of being enlightened. So this tells us that being enlightened is some sort of state. Again, not a very helpful definition when describing just what the fuck enlightenment is. The third definition points us to the Age of Enlightenment, which took place as a philosophical movement in the 18th century, which is also referred to as the Age of Reason. Still, no definition at all about what enlightenment is, only a description of a philosophical come political movement that was marked by rejection of traditional social, religious, and political ideas and an emphasis on rationalism. Shit, no explanation of what enlightenment is here either. Maybe the last offered definition will finally shed some light on what those pursuing enlightenment are seeking. The fourth definition says this about enlightenment. In Buddhism, a final, blessed state marked by the absence of desire or suffering. So let me ask you, ladies and gentlemen, do any of these definitions now clarify to you what enlightenment is, or solidify any ideas about enlightenment you have embraced? Probably the closest explanation to what most people are seeking is the one related to Buddhism. So I guess you are all seeking to find that state marked by the absence of desire or suffering, right? Unfortunately, these are the only definitions that Webster's provides about enlightenment, so I guess everyone is just going to have to make up what the fuck they think enlightenment means, because it sure as hell isn't defined too keenly at all, is it? What this research into the definition of enlightenment shows us is that no one knows what the fuck it means, and everyone creates their own internal expectations about what it should be. I covered the specific aspect of this in my video, Chasing Expectations. Since no one can get any kind of valid description on what enlightenment actually is, then everyone seeking it is chasing some kind of mystical phantom of undefined belief. Even the definition of enlightenment associated with Buddhism is rather deceptive, first off by throwing in the word blessed to misdirect people into the idea that it is something religious or holy. So on your path to enlightenment, what are you really seeking, since there is no definitive explanation about just what the fuck it is? You need to ponder on this very seriously, for if you have been involved in your own advancement for any length of time, you have to ask yourself who told you what you think you know about enlightenment, whose ideas are feeding your desire, and whose mystical realities are you feeding with your desire. Who is harvesting your energies into you putting your efforts into these beliefs? The simple fact is that most people seeking enlightenment have a firm belief in some kind of mystical higher power that governs the universe. And just as I shared in my recent video, when nihilism sets in, Friedrich Nietzsche accurately noted that the individual is seeking some sort of communion with his concept of the divine, however they perceive it to be in their own minds. The insistence by humans to be part of this alleged divine, whether that be God, the angels, the ascended masters, the great cosmic oneness, or the presumed divine aliens from the Pleiades or wherever, humans demand to be associated with these mystical ideas and mystical beings. What they don't realize is this presumed oneness they seek with their God or other assumed divine entities only feeds their ego need to be special, and it also feeds that yearning for group association by the Hapim hive mind virus. As Nietzsche noted in Will to Power, this human demand to be associated with or part of the divine gives us our value, or at least gives the Hapim ego its sense of value. So basically, it is feeding the ego's self-illusion about itself. In Gemma's latest video, Keep Your Hands to Yourself, she told you about how these doctrines are energetic harnessing programs that feed your Hapim ego, and you must feed them. When you buy into any belief, you are making your dedication to the doctrines by holding the belief. It feeds your ego and feeds off your soika. I'm sharing this information about enlightenment and the fact that the word, whose first known use was only in 1621, has no real definition. I want to bust the bubble of mystical association with the word enlightenment that so many people harbor and destroy the mystical phantom of enchantment that the word brings to mind when people hear it or use it. The fact is that until 1930, with the importation to the West of Buddhist ideas by the Japanese author D.T. Suzuki, who was a Zen Buddhist, the word enlightenment until that time was pretty much exclusively associated with the Age of Enlightenment philosophy of the 18th century. We have stated in our other videos that every time you turn over a spiritual rock, you will find people associated with theosophy in one form or another. In the case of D.T. Suzuki, you don't have to scratch his veneer very much to find that theosophical association. Suzuki studied under the tutelage and guidance of a man named Paul Carus, a German-American author, philosopher, and student of comparative religions. Carus exchanged letters with Thomas Edison, who was a member of the Theosophical Society, and John Dewey, who was a member of the Fabian Society and the Theosophical Society, and who was the primary shaper of the American educational system with his Fabian socialist philosophies on education. The others with whom Carus kept running lettered dialogue were probably of the same ilk as Edison and Dewey. Paul Carus was an attendee of the Parliament of World Religions, another theosophical endeavor designed to pull all the world religions under the banner and control of the Fabians and Theosophists as their one world religion. So the word enlightenment, as it is presently used and understood in Western spiritual traditions and the New Age, finds its importation, interpretation, and usage pushed forth by the Theosophists. Any ideas you may have regarding what enlightenment means to you is imported as Zen Buddhism and passed through the propaganda filtering of the Theosophical and Fabian societies. I hate to tell you folks, but if you have bought into any of these ideas of so-called spiritual enlightenment, you have been rooked and lied to. Now let's take a moment to remove the enchantment associated with the theosophical misuse of the word enlightenment and bring some pragmatism to the term for what it should mean in reality versus the false interpretation of the word through spiritual and political chicanery provided by first cognition religionists and Fabian theosophist political activists. I explain the 9 virtues taught by Buddha in my book, False Prophecies, Reassessing Buddha, and the Call to the Second Cognition. In explaining these 9 virtues, I provided pragmatic explanations of what Buddha meant by these principles without the misdirection of first cognition interpreters putting a religious spin on his second cognition doctrines. For those interested in those explanations and who are interested in escaping the fantasy world associated with theosophy-driven mystical abuse of the word. The word enlightenment itself is suggestive of someone walking in darkness seeking to find an exit from the darkness into the light of understanding, thus the real meaning of the word. Buddha called this state of cognitive freedom nirvana. I use the term second cognition to define the same state of being. The darkness is the world of illusion called the first cognition realm of the Hapim ego. The light one seeks to find through eroding all those illusions that the Hapim-infected ego believes about its world and itself. When one can finally get rid of all these illusions of perception, like wiping mud off a windshield, then they come to the light of understanding. Reaching this state of cognitive awareness has absolutely nothing to do with mysticism or meeting some concept of the divine, but is attained through hard and pragmatic psychological work and self-analysis by each individual carrying out their first cognition trash. It is this cognitive trash that leaves one in the world of darkness and dependency, insecurity, doubt, and lack of self-confidence and ignorance. One reaches this state of enlightenment by periodically looking back and reviewing the material they have read or listened to months or years ago before they can really see their own progress. This is the invisible part of the growth process that I reported in our video, Clearing and Growth, for those who either have not watched that video or may want to revisit it. When I work with people individually, I always instruct them to remember where they came from, meaning that they should remember how ignorant and uninformed they were when they started on their path. I emphasize this very strongly because if one doesn't remember where they started in this process, they will not be able to accurately gauge their own growth through this process. To see the invisible part of your cognitive advancement requires a retrospective look at where you used to be and where you are now. This is done by revisiting material you have already digested months or years later to see if you have gleaned any more understanding through your work and efforts over the months and years of your growing process. Most of the time, we can't really see how we have grown until we do that retrospective look at where we were to see how we advanced to where we are now. It is by reviewing what came before that we see our progress and enlightenment in the present. So this retrospective analysis is a very good way to gauge your stage of development. Your growth will make itself known to you when you revisit material you have digested before and may not have fully understood, to realize in retrospect by revisiting the material, rewatching a video, or rereading a book, where you discover that what you once did not understand now is completely comprehensible based on your growth. Without this retrospective analysis, one can often feel that they are not moving or growing in this process, for the road to cognitive advancement, the real meaning of enlightenment, may very well escape your notice. The reason I entitled this video Retrospective Enlightenment is to emphasize the importance of reviewing things every 6 months or so to see if you have grown or not. You gain the awareness of your progress and enlightenment by utilizing such a review process periodically. To fully understand who you are, you have to always remember how you got where you are, for in time, it may well fall on you to teach others. And if you lose that touchstone of relationship with others, if you can't remember how you were at their stages of development, you will not be able to guide them much on your own. Now, I know many of you are sitting there thinking, I will never be able to teach this to anyone else. But you know what? For the longest time, I felt the very same way. I never saw myself possessing the ability to share the things I do now with our readers and viewers. Such an idea was ludicrous to me because I felt for the longest time that there would be more qualified authorities to do that. But then I discovered that virtually all of my presumed authorities were themselves full of shit and often willfully deceitful, hiding a sinister agenda. The reason we are doing this stuff, writing our books and doing these videos, is for the very simple reason that no one else in the marketplace is qualified to share what we do. We became our own authorities and decided that it was up to us to set the record straight on all this mystical hogwash. Whether anyone can accept this explanation or not is solely up to their own decision making. As with all of our material, the viewer is free to take it or leave it. I'd like to thank all our viewers and subscribers for taking the time to listen to what we share, and we hope that you're finding benefit from our work. I hope I have provided you enough information in this presentation to ponder that will benefit your process. I'm Endall Beall, and until next time, stay the course and don't give up on yourself.